welcome everybody to the Purple Knights podcast. And this edition now is going to be about the future of academia as it relates to print. And we know, especially since 2017, there have been a lot of different academic events that have gone on, symposia and other things like that. So, to talk about that subject, I'm joined today by Angela Duff, who is a professor in integrated design and media at NYU Tandon, and also associate vice provost at New York University.
That is correct.
So, okay, so I'm very excited to talk to you. The idea of Prince as an academic subject is very interesting to me because I've always been very uh, involved in education. I've gone to school in some shape or form ever since I was 2 years old. So I officially stopped being a student in about 2015. But as you know, in life, we never really stop learning. So we're always perpetually students in my estimation. But the academic world has always been very interesting to me. And combining that with the passion of my Prince fandom is very, very cool and a subject that I can very, very much sink my teeth into. So I'm very honored to have you on today to talk about some of your work and passion projects and also the future of Prince academia going forward. Um, so let's just start out a little bit about with your history as maybe a fan of Prince and also your history in academia and how those two sort of converged. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So my first Prince album that I heard was Dirty Mind, and I was 10 years old. And obviously, I didn't really know what I was listening to in terms of the sexual content. But actually, what compelled me to listen to the album was the cover. The cover spoke volumes to me because I knew that this was a guy who did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And growing up as a Black Southern woman in Alabama, there were a lot of restrictions, particularly since I was raised by my grandparents, of what a good girl should do, what a good Southern belle should do. And Prince wasn't doing any of that. So he really stood out to me. And from then on, I was really hooked. I saw my first Prince concert was Prince's 1999 tour, where Vanity Six and the Time opened up for him. And I saw that in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was 12 when I saw that show. I was incredibly lucky to see that show because my mom told me if she would have known who Prince was, I would not have gotten to that show. But I got to the show because my aunt and uncle took me, and they were at the time in their early 20s. So they were excited to see Prince, and they were like, "Sure, we'll take her." So I got to see that as my first Prince concert. In terms of my academic history, I've been teaching since 1999. There's a little Prince tie-in for you. But I started at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. And prior to joining academia, I was a designer and art director of websites. I am very proud to have worked on the first two iterations of davidbowie.com, and I was the art director on the second one. And what that meant is that David Bowie personally selected my design, and I art directed a lot of other designers to realized my vision. And actually, David Bowie is really the reason I went into academia, because one of the things he told me was, usually when you do client work, you get a lot of feedback from clients, make it bigger, change that, this and that. And David Bowie told me, he was like, I would not tell you. He said, I would not want you to come in the studio and tell me what to do. So I'm not going to tell you what to do when it comes to your design. And he didn't tell me to change one thing, not one thing. So I had absolute freedom. And I've never had that opportunity with any other client in my entire life. And after that, I was just kind of done with client work because I just had all this freedom with David Bowie. And I miss art school where there was a lot of creativity. And so I decided to have my salary cut in less than half, but return to academia because it's so rewarding. Like, my alumni are my legacy, and I have some pretty amazing alumni. So that's kind of how I got into academia. But Prince came along in terms of the intersection between academia and Prince. Is because I've always, everything that I've ever done has always intersected with music in some sort of way. Like, my first job was at a record store with Camelot Music. There was a record store used to be called Camelot. And when I worked in industry, my dream job was, actually designing record covers. And I was able to freelance for LaFace Records. So I was able to design some record covers for like Casey Haley of Jodeci and Donnell Jones, which was a LaFace signed artist. And so I did a couple of others, but those are the ones that come to mind right now. And then when I started teaching, I guess let me go back. So when I first started listening to Prince, I grew up in a household with my aunt and two uncles, and my aunt and uncle, that's the same aunt and uncle who took me to the 1999 tour, and they were huge music fans. They collected a lot of music, and I was able to listen to all kinds of music when I was little. So I would listen to, they were listening to The Who, like Edgar Winter, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Hendrix, P-Funk, Slave, like just so many just incredible artists. And so I grew up around music. Music was always on. My uncle or my aunt, they were always playing music. So in my teens, I became a little record collector. Like, I love collecting vinyl, and then eventually into CDs. And the reason why I mention this is that in the mid 2000s, I started an online radio show just to sort of justify my record buying habits, because I've spent a lot of money on records. So much so, in fact, that I remember this guy, I had a birthday party, my one and only birthday party when I turned 31. And a friend of a friend came, with a friend of mine. And when he came into my apartment, he didn't say hello. He was like, oh my God, you could have bought a house with all of this music. Like, why are you buying all this music? Like, he just could not understand why I was buying all this music. And I was like, music is super important to me. It's the reason why I get out of bed every morning. I mean, other people spend their money on cigarettes and alcohol and going to the clubs and all that kind of stuff. I spend my money on records. It's just kind of what I do. So when I started teaching it, I still wanted a musical outlet. So I started my radio show in the mid 2000s, and it lasted until 2016. And 2016 is when I started podcasting. And I actually, my very first podcast was for essentially Under the Cherry Moon Parade, because Under the Cherry Moon is my favorite Prince narrative film. And we did it in March of 2016. So this is when obviously Prince was still alive. But I love this podcast called The Music Snobs. And I don't know, there wasn't any what a quote unquote Southern podcast that I knew of, meaning like Southern folks that talked about the kind of music that I wanted to talk about. So I reached out to my high school Prince friend. His name is Ricky Wyatt, and he was already podcasting with grown folks music. And I met Ivan Orr, who does a lot of different podcasts for grown folks music. And I was like, I want to start podcasting about Prince because I just love talking about Prince. So we started that podcast in March of 2016. And Vanity had just died, and also known as Denise Matthews. So I remember on this first podcast, I was saying how it's so important to, just give all the people in the Purple Kingdom their flowers. I didn't have any idea that like within a month, it was going to be Prince, which was really kind of devastating. So when that happened, I actually stopped listening to music for about 6 months. I mean, not even Prince's music. I just couldn't listen to music anymore. And it was kind of terrifying because music is the only way that I know how to cope with life. And so if music can't get me through, I just didn't know what I was going to do. But luckily, after 6 months of mourning, I was able to want to listen to music again. And I started podcasting heavily. And then the podcast turned into the symposia. But I can talk more about that transition.
That's great though, that music has been such a integral part of your life, and because I've had similar experiences, growing up. Um, I actually remember I was born in 1980, so I'm a dirty mind baby, really. But uh, I actually remember music from when I was younger, like really young, better than I do my preteen and teen years. So I really appreciate 80s music, and because of my brother, I appreciate classic rock, so all those bands you were talking about earlier that you grew up with, I appreciate those bands as well. Um, I've been a Prince fan ever since I was 3 years old, 1983, hearing Little Red Corvette on the radio. Um, and of course, you were talking about how you were young, too young to really grasp the lyrical content of the music. But for me, I was also too young to grasp that. But what really hooked me was the vocal intensity that Prince uh, displayed, and also the melodies as well. So I was basically hooked on Prince by the age of 3. So yeah, and music in general plays a very important part of my life. I feel kind of embarrassed admitting that I haven't really listened to contemporary music since about 1995. So I'm a little out of touch as far as newer artists are concerned. But yeah, music is a big part of my life as well, and it's definitely a coping mechanism for me as well to get through life. And I had that mourning period as well where I wasn't able to listen to Prince's music as much as I'd like. Usually, I tend to listen to Prince at least once a day, every day. So for me, that was quite a difference as far as in the morning period where I wasn't able to really connect with the music and vibe to it like I usually do. But yeah, I had a similar experience with that as well. And yeah, if if the listeners and viewers, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on blogtalkradio.com or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, D'Angela's website is polishedsolid.com. So go there and check out all of her work. And she DJs as well. So that's pretty interesting. I thought that was really cool when I read that. And of course, the Grown Folks Music Podcast. And you produce Prince content for them. So that's very cool. And of course the academic symposia that you've been, not only that you've organized but that you've participated in uh, various symposia since 2017. And I want to give a shout out to Kirsty Fairclough and Dr. Mike Olin. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right, sir, but they held I believe it was the Purple Rain Conference
That is correct.
in the
REIGN.
yes, Purple Rain IGN uh, in the UK in 2017, and then they recently held the virtual conference Prince 78 to 88, which the only presentation I was able to see live that very first day was yours.
Oh, wow.
And I really, really loved it. And I really was struck by it. So that's when the gears started turning to really reach out to you and get you on this podcast. So I'm very, very grateful that that goal was realized today. But yeah, and the symposia that you've curated yourself is very, very, very cool. They're basically centered around anniversaries of different albums and eras. Is that right?
That is correct. You're absolutely right. I can, if you're interested, I can tell you how it kind of started.
Okay, yes.
So I spoke at both of those previous Kirsty and Mike's conferences. I went to Purple Rain and I spoke about Under the Cherry Moon. And for the 7888, I spoke about Prince and smoke. more specifically, spoke from like the dry ice machines and how prevalent it was, particularly during controversy in 1999. I just love Prince and smoke, but that's a whole nother thing. When I started telling all my Prince friends what I wanted to talk about at 7888, they thought I was crazy. They were like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, I'll show you." So I'm glad that the talk got a really good reception, because a lot of my Prince friends thought I was a little crazy. Anyway, when 1980 and 1987, which is this, like, it was like June, actually a month after the Purple Rain conference, the Revolution played Webster Hall in New York, and I had already seen them twice at First Avenue that fall when they did 3 nights in a row. And I was essentially trying to see the Revolution whenever I could, or this go around. Anyway, I was walking out of the venue and I saw a Prince friend say hello, and she was with another friend. And they were like, "We're gonna go get something to eat. Why don't you come with us?" So I was like, "Sure." So this friend that I met, her name was Mabel Ivory. And I was telling her that what I really wanted to do was watch Princess sign the Times at NYU with a few friends, because I hadn't seen it on the big screen in so long. So I wanted to kind of just reserve a room and watch it on some really good speakers. And she was like, "Why do you want to do that when it could be so much bigger?" I was like, okay. She was like, let's invite the public. Let's just make it a really big event. Prince deserves this. And so I was able to get along with her and Deanna and another guy named Ron Worthy, who runs soulhead.com. We pulled our resources and we were able to advertise and turn it around. In probably 2 or 3 weeks, we held the event at NYU. And what I was able to do was invite who I call now the core four, which are Zaire Ali, Anil Dash, Miles Marshall Lewis, and Elliot Powell. They're the core four because they were there at the very beginning for the Sign of the Times event. At the time, I didn't know them very well. Like I had conversations with a couple of them, actually all of them in some capacity. But I knew they were purple nerds, like huge like I. And so it was a really great event and people loved it. And a week or two later, I was at a Maite book signing in Tribeca at a Barnes and Noble. And a lot of people who had attended it, but they were coming up to me and they were saying, well, what are you going to do next? Because I hadn't even thought about it. I mean, I just really thought it was going to be kind of like a one and done kind of thing, because Sign of Times is one of my favorite eras. But when I realized that people actually really appreciate it and enjoy the event, I realized that I should do another one, especially because the next year, 1988 is the year of Lovesexy, and Lovesexy is my favorite tour, which I was able to see twice in Atlanta. And so the little small event, like one panel and a screening, turned into a proper symposium. And I was able to get Kat Glover to speak, Dr. Fink to speak, and Ingrid Chavez. And what was really fantastic about Ingrid is that I asked her if she would recite the opening lines to Lovesexy, Rain is Wet, Sugar is Sweet. And she agreed to do it, which was really, really fantastic. She hadn't done that, as far as I know, since the recitation of it on the album. And a couple of days before the event, Chuck Zwicky, who was a sound engineer for Prince, more predominantly for the Batman soundtrack, he said he wanted to come to the event. And he wanted to bring Joan Blaney, who was one of the main engineers on Lovesexy. And I was thrilled. I always loved talking to the sound engineers. So after Kat, Dr. Fink, and Ingrid spoke, we had Joe Blaney and Chuck Zwicky. And then we had, talks, presentations essentially from academics, like it's sort of what we've been doing since. So that was the first Prince Symposium, but actually a week before that, I had another symposium for Betty Davis, the musician, not the actress, the ex-wife of Miles Davis, because her documentary had just come out, and I was able to get the director, Phil Cox, to do a Q&A after we screened the documentary. And we also had 4 different talks for that symposium, including Greg Tate, who is very, very well known in music circles, amongst others. So I basically had 2 symposia back to back, one week and another one the next week, which I'll never do again because it was too much, but it's a long story. The Betty Davis was actually scheduled at a different time, but the director, who's based in the UK, was already going to be in the States. So in order to sort of cut costs and work with this timeline, we had to move it up. So I didn't plan it that way. It just sort of happened that way. So I don't recommend doing 2 in-person events back to back. It was not fun, but it actually turned out pretty okay.
Yeah, you mentioned the core 4, who I'm connected to on Twitter, but I haven't really interacted with them. I don't know them too well, but I'm honored to be connected with them on Twitter. I've probably interacted with Neil the most out of the four, but that's not saying a lot because there's just been a few comments and a few like tweets here and there. But yeah, they're very, very cool people. Um, I also want to give shout outs to several people that are doing very, very valuable intellectual work about Prince. Kanisa Williams, who is on the Muse to the Pharaoh podcast. Scott Woods, the writer from Columbus, Ohio, who's written a book of essays, uh, Prince and Weird Little Black Boy Gods, that came out in 2018. Shout out to Scott Woods, Jonathan Harwell, and Reverend Katrina Jenkins, who put together, edited a volume on theology and Prince. So there's lots of work being done with Prince's life and work from a theological perspective. In that same vein, Erica Thompson, also from Columbus, Ohio, is working on a uh, massive volume about faith in Prince's work and how it drove his life and work. I'm very much looking forward to that. There was a book in 2018 by Joseph Vogel that's a very good primer for intellectual discussion on Prince, and that is This Thing Called Life by Joseph Vogel, not to be confused with the Neil Carlin book with a similar title. But all these folks are doing great work as far as promoting intellectual discussion of Prince. And I also wanted to lastly give a shout out to DJ UMB from the UK and Edgar Cruz, the Dutch Prince fan on Twitter that curate the Prince Twitter threads that are very, very informative and very in depth. And I had the honor of participating in one of those recently. I did a thread on All Day, All Night from the Jill Jones self titled album from 1987. So I was very honored and very happy to participate in that. And also shout out to Arun Saldana, uh, of course, organized the Prince from Minneapolis Symposium in 2018, which I had the honor of presenting at. I presented a paper on Prince's eschatology in 1999 in Purple Rain. So I had the honor of doing that. And there's just so many people doing such great intellectual work on and about Prince. And of course, I consider D'Angela a big part of that with this symposia that she's organized and curated. The last one you did was 1 + 1 + 1 is 3, which was in honor of the 20th anniversary of the Rainbow Children album. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, before I do though, there are a couple, one book I really want to highlight that Kirsty and Mike, they have a
Yes.
volume called Prince and Popular Music, Critical Perspectives on an Interdisciplinary Life. I actually contribute an essay in that volume about Under the Cherry Moon. It came out in 2020. And actually, Kirsty and Mike, they're working on an upcoming academic journal called, they're doing like a special edition called Interactions Journal, Dream Factories, Prince, Sign the Times, Box Sets, and Cultural Artifacts. And I'll also have an essay in that one as well.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, yes, they're very good, very valuable additions to the growing canon of Prince studies, the burgeoning academic field of Prince studies.
Yes, and there's one more I also like to give a shout out to. Celie McGinnis, who often speaks at my symposia. He used to edit a journal called Black Magnolias, and there was a special Prince edition where I had an essay, Michael Gonzalez, Robert Loss. So you can actually, if you search for it, like Black Magnolias journal, Prince edition, you can read it for free online.
Yeah, that sounds very, very cool. I will definitely do that and definitely urge my viewers and listeners to look that up as well. Um, and D'Angela, thank you very much for picking up the slack because I wanted to mention all these sources that you're bringing up and you're sort of helping me out with that. So thank you very much for the assist.
Of course, of course. So as far as 1 + 1 + 1 is 3, it essentially was for, as you said, 20 years of the Rainbow Children, 30 years of Diamonds and Pearls, and I can't believe, and 40 years of controversy. So the reason why I did all 3 is because I just couldn't choose between, like, if I only had to do one. Well, if, to be honest, if I only had to do one, it would have been controversy. But I got a lot, particularly from Kanisa and others. They really wanted the Rainbow Children, and I totally understood why. And Elliot Powell, part of Core 4, he was like, you better do a symposium about Diamonds and Pearls, because I really didn't want to do one on Diamonds and Pearls, only because it's one of Prince's most successful projects, and I really try to focus on Prince's albums that don't get talked about enough. But I decided to do all 3, and it turned out that a lot of the speakers actually wanted to talk about Diamonds and Pearls, which I found fascinating. So most people wanted to talk about Diamonds and Pearls. Second was the Rainbow Children, and controversy actually came in third. So I actually had to beg people to talk about controversy, which I thought was it just really shocked me. I was like, really? But it was, it turned out to be really, really awesome. In terms of controversy, we were able to talk to Dr. Fink and Peggy McCreary, Peggy Mac, as most people call her. And then for Diamonds and Pearls, I had the distinct pleasure of talking to Scott McCullough, who was either the cinematographer or the director of videos for Prince around that time. He was like so incredible and so generous. And then for the Rainbow Children, I was able to talk to the cover artist, Kababi Bayak, as well as Afshin Shahidi, the photographer, as well as Sam Jennings, who did a lot of the design work. So those were the keynotes, and because it was a 3-day symposium, and each day was dedicated to one of those 3 albums. And we had roundtable discussions as well as talks for each of the albums. So we had 8 talks apiece, 8 presentations on Diamonds and Pearls and the Rainbow Children, and we have 4 presentations about controversy. And then we also had a roundtable, one of my favorite roundtables ever. We always do roundtables, but one of my favorites for the Times debut. And on that roundtable was Michael Dean, and he was just hilarious. It's just such a great time. If you want to have a great time, watch the Time roundtable from 1 + 1 + 1 is 3. So that was the symposium that I did this year, but I did do a couple of other events after that. So we did a Welcome to America virtual celebration where we have 4 different takes from the album, 4 different roundtable discussions about the album. One was a Euro take, which was really exciting for me. We had Casey Rain. Everybody should know who Casey Rain is, of the Violet Reality, if you're into your Prince people. And then we also had Kirsty. We had Karen Gabay, who is BBC Manchester. radio personality. We had Edgar Cruz of the Prince Twitter threads, and we had DJ UMB, which was, or DJ I call him DJ UMB. And I'm sure I'm missing, oh yes, and Hasit Shah, who is a UK journalist. So they did like the Euro take, and then we had the core four, so plus me, so we did a take on it. Then we had an all-female panel take on it, which was Kanisa Williams, Tanya Pendleton, who is a music journalist, Ronna Nicole, who's also a music journalist and singer. And I feel like I'm missing somebody. I know I'm missing somebody else, which I feel really bad about. So I am going to quickly look that up so I don't get hate mail and see. And let's see. So let's see. It was, oh my God, I can't believe it. So Erica Thompson and Miss TLC. And Miss TLC, everyone should know from Prince Anniversaries. So we had like an all-female panel. And we also had another panel of guys, Nicolay, who's one of my favorite producers, but also a massive Prince fan, Harold Pride, who's my brother and Love Sexy, Arthur Turnbull, who's one of the music snobs, Ricky Wyatt, who I do the Grown Folks Music podcast with, Scott Woods. So that was also an incredible conversation. And then to end that event, I was able to talk to Mathieu Baton, who was a designer of the Welcome to America set. And he did an incredible job, and everyone should know Mathieu because he's a massive Prince fan, but he's also an extraordinary photographer and designer in his own right. So that happened over the summer. And then 2 or 3 weeks ago, I co-produced an event with the PRN Alumni Foundation. It was their 5-year anniversary, and we centered it around Princess The Truth, which was a Record Store Day release. And so we had 4 different talks, a round table with the core 4, and me and Arthur from the Music Snobs. And then we had a really fantastic panel of everybody who worked on The Truth. So we had Jackie Thompson, who was, working with Prince during the Truth's time. And we had the extraordinary Rhonda Smith, who is, bassist extraordinaire. We had, Mike Scott, who played the guitar. We had Kat Dyson on guitar, Steve Park, who was doing art and photography around that time. Hans Martin Buff, who was the engineer of that record. He did a phenomenal job. And the moderator for that panel was Alan Light, who is a music journalist, but also an author, and he wrote a book about Prince. So, so I did basically 3 events this year, in addition to speaking at other folks' events.
Yeah, and then you're not slowing down. You've still got more stuff coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about Sexy MF, which is scheduled to happen in March, I believe?
Yes.
And then
yeah.
also the Triple Threat Symposium, which is going to happen later in the fall next year. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. So putting on these symposia, they take a lot out of me because technically I'm an introvert by nature. And so in doing these events is a lot of work because I have to do it, on the weekends and after hours, blah, blah, blah. And so I really try to only do one, but Kanisa convinced me that we cannot let next year go by without doing a love symbol symposia. I didn't want to combine it with the Triple Threat because it just didn't make any sense because we're already talking about 3 different albums for the Triple Threat Symposium. And for those of you who don't know, but you should know, the Triple Threat is essentially the Vanity Six's only record, and then the Time's second album, What Time Is It? And then Prince's 1999. So for the Sexy MF Symposium, well, Sexy MF 30 Symposium. We're going to focus on the Love Symbol album. And originally I wanted it to be one day, but I don't think one day is going to be enough for everything that I want to be talked about. So it's probably gonna be 2 days and it's gonna be virtual. And it would be the last weekend in March. I haven't even really started promoting it. So this is essentially an exclusive because nobody really knows when, because I try not to advertise too far in advance. But yeah, it's gonna definitely be the last weekend in March, that Saturday and Sunday. And there'll be the usual suspects. And for the one in the fall, I'm really trying to do it hybrid, but I don't know. It all depends on COVID. And by hybrid, I mean having it predominantly in person, but having some speakers speak virtually if they can't, make it to New York, but also involving the audience more. Prior to COVID and before I pivoted to virtual symposia, when they were in person. So I did Love Sexy in person and I did Bat Dance at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia in 2019. When I was doing them in person, well, at least the Love Sexy one, as well as the Betty Davis one, I live streamed them. So anybody in the world could actually watch it in real time. I remember for Love Sexy, we had like 3,000 people on the live stream in real time. But since doing the virtual symposia, depending on the platform I've used, it's much more interactive versus a live stream. So I really want to keep that interactive component for virtual audiences. But it really depends on, what COVID does, because they've already announced a new strain of COVID this week. And who knows what the world is going to be like next year, but I'm crossing my fingers and hair strands that we'll be able to do a hybrid one in the fall. And that's another reason why I'm waiting to the fall, because I'm trying to figure out what's happening with COVID. But nobody knows. Who knows?
Sure, sure. Well, I just want to be one of the people that thanks you for your tireless work. And I know it's a lot of hours and, like you say, a lot of sacrifice on the weekends and after hours. But you've done so much for the Prince community at large, and especially the intellectual academic wing of the Prince community. You've done wonderful work. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for everything you do. And I know you've got a large network of support from people online and in person as well. And I just wanted to say also that talking to you, it strikes me so much. Of course, we're recording this around Thanksgiving, and I wanted to express my gratitude to the associated artists and people that have participated in all these symposia and volunteered their time and wisdom and stories. Um, it's a very, very great thing and very, very much deserving of gratitude and recognition. So I wanted to put that out there as well. Thank you so much to all the associated artists and people that have participated in these symposia and really added to the depth and quality of the work. So
Yes,
thank you to
yeah,
everybody.
yes. I would like to actually talk about one more, just to give more thanks to these
Yes,
artists.
definitely.
So the other one I would like to talk about is actually 2020's DM40 GB30, which was 40 years of Dirty Mind and 30 years of Graffiti Bridge. And it's so important for me to talk about that one because of the keynote participants. Andre Simone was a keynote participant in that, and he not only participated once, but he participated twice. It was really fun watching him watch the Ritz performance of Dirty Mind. And he gave his commentary alongside Vernon Reed, as well as Nicolay and one of my friends, Jason Orr. So that was a sheer treat. I didn't think he would say yes, but Andre did. So I am eternally thankful for Andre Simone. And anybody who knows me know that I absolutely adore Jill Jones. And Jill Jones also participated twice. And in fact, she is the only Prince associate that was there in the chat. She was there all 3 days. She was chatting with the fans, and her commitment was extraordinary. But she and Jerome Benton, a person who I absolutely adore, they gave a live commentary to Graffiti Bridge. Jill had never watched Graffiti Bridge, so she was giving commentary to the film that she starred in, but she had never seen. So what was really amazing about that was that I was watching Jill responding to watching, herself and watching the film. That was like one of the most extraordinary moments of all of the symposia and events that I've done, is actually that moment. And then obviously Jerome was hilarious, the way that Jerome is always hilarious. So I have to give him massive thanks. And I also have on my Under the Cherry Moon shirt today, because I love the film so much, and I love Jerome so much and his performance in that film. And so if we're talking about, the symposia, I cannot leave those 3 people out.
Yeah, shout out to Andre, uh, Jill, and Jerome. You guys are amazing. And I actually did a 2-part interview with Jill. Actually, it was recorded as one long interview, but I had to break it up into 2 parts because when I first uploaded to YouTube, there were restrictions on the channel because I hadn't verified my YouTube channel yet by that point. So I had to upload it in 2 parts, but that's on the YouTube channel as well as the Blog Talk Radio archive for the Purple Knights podcast. So check that out if you're interested. Love Jill, have chatted with her numerous times on Facebook Messenger. She was there to lend an ear when I needed somebody to talk to about grieving for Prince. So I really appreciate Jill Jones a lot. And also, as you say, props to Andre and Jerome, 2 wonderful guys. So before I let you go, D'Angela, I wanted to ask you uh, a question which, on the surface, the answer can seem very obvious, right? But I wanted to get your thoughts on this as an academic professional, and that is to say, what do you think makes Prince such a ripe and apt subject for academic analysis?
Yeah, that actually, I get asked that a lot actually. And it's just that Prince was so multifaceted. He was much more than a song and dance man. So obviously he was an incredible musician, a fantastic songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, as we all know, extraordinary vocalist. So in terms of musicology, he's a great study. But beyond that, Prince was a businessman. He was an entrepreneur. He was future forward in thinking in terms of different distribution models. He was a tireless philanthropist. He gave so much. And he was always on the cutting edge in terms of like stage technology. And just looking at his tours, obviously, Roy Bennett had a lot to do with that, but Prince allowed him to do some incredible stuff in terms of the stage delivery. And there's just so much to talk about. You can talk about race, you can talk about sexuality, you can talk about religion, you can just talk about so much so he's just like chock full of academic study.
Very, very cool. And as a curator of symposia, you're right there on the cutting edge of academic work on Prince. And are you excited for what the future holds as far as uh, Prince and academia?
Yes, I'm very excited. I know of one project that a friend of mine is going to do, but I don't want to announce it until they're ready to announce it. But I'm personally very excited about this project. And I'm going to follow in the footsteps of Kirsty and Mike and hopefully do my own edited volume of Prince essays directly from work from the symposia. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm sure Kirsty and Mike are going to be doing something incredible moving forward with their Center for Prince Studies. So it's not stopping anytime soon.
Very, very exciting stuff. And I just wanted to let everybody know you can follow D'Angela on social media, Facebook and Twitter. It's both Polished Solid. So I'll have those links in the description box for the video and also for the audio on blogtalkradio.com and Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'll have those links for you. Thank you so much, D'Angela, for joining me today. And like I say, I appreciate your time and effort. And I know it's a lot of work and it's exhausting sometimes, but I hope you know that you have a large community of followers that really appreciate everything you do. And we're behind you 100%. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris, and everybody who's ever supported anything that Prince has done, because it's all about Prince at the end of the day. I just want everyone to be really clear. I'm only doing this for Prince.
Great. Prince, we love you. We miss you. We'll continue to do the work. All right. So with that, I'm Chris Johnson. Thank you for watching on YouTube and streaming the audio on blogtalkradio.com, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And until next time, this is Chris Johnson. Goodbye, everybody.